Dudes, welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. Thanks for tuning in. See this fragrance? Niche quality. It's a designer fragrance. It's fantastic. This is niche-like. That is something that you hear on a lot of these channels. You'll hear people say, and I've done it too, not often, you run out of adjectives to describe fragrances you like, and sometimes you say it's niche quality. But when I really had to put my money where my mouth was and go through my collection of designers and come up with 10 that I thought were niche-like, I couldn't. I came up with 5, and I barely scraped together 5. 2 of them are from the same line because it's hard. I'll give you an example. This is Honor Man and for Amouage, and this didn't do very well. It's not super popular, but you know what? When you smell it, it's from Amouage. It's a high-quality house. You can really tell this is niche. The notes are very distinct. The notes are very high quality. The fragrance feels expensive. Even though people might not like it, you know there's quality here. And it's just very hard for me to find a lot of designer fragrances that have this kind of quality. But there are 2 factors that make up niche. One is high quality, but the other one is creativity. So there are some designer houses that have a very high in creativity and that they have solid quality. So I went and combined those 2 to come up with a list of 5 fragrances that are designers that I think are niche quality. And I think I have very strict standards. I think it's a hard thing to do, but I'm going to make my case for each of them here. Okay, the first fragrance I'm talking about today is L'Eau de pour Homme Noir Ombre by E.C. Miyake. Noir Ombre it just means black amber in French, right? So it's a very dark, ambery fragrance. Pretty simple. And I think in that particular genre of very dark amber fragrances, this is as good as you're going to get, even though it's a designer fragrance. And that's the kind of quality we're looking for. Now, this isn't cheap. This is about a $100 fragrance most of the time. A lot of bottles available at the moment, which has driven the price down a little bit, but for a long time you couldn't find this. But this is a very high quality designer. It's basically as it says. There's a dark side of this, and it comes from a lot of leather, and the amber part is a lot of sweetness. There's amber, tonka, and vanilla. Now, there are some spices, saffron, nutmeg, coriander, and cinnamon, but really it's the noir part, the leather, that makes this very dark. And the reason I say it's the best is it is somewhat similar to Habdan by Parfum de Marly. Now, Habdan has some definite differences. You know, Habdan has apple, this does not, and this has leather, Habdan does not. But yeah, I just think this is of higher quality. It's a little bit more wearable. Habdan is so deep and dark. It's almost too dark. And I mean, Habdan did come first, and I can hear people going, well, this is just a clone. It's not a clone because of those differences I mentioned earlier, but also because Habdan is not a super popular fragrance in the Parfum de Marly line. Like, a lot of people watching this will never have heard of it. And number 2, if you're going to make a clone, you don't make a clone $100 or $80 or $100 fragrance like this is. You go cheaper than that. I think E.C. Miyake learned lessons from Habdan and just put out a better fragrance. So if you're looking for like that sort of dark, moody, sweet winter fragrance, I think this is your best bet. Okay, number 2 is a house I actually thought was a niche house. It's Maison Margiela, and the fragrance, it's By the Fireplace from the Replica line. When I first got this, or not this, but when I first got my first Maison Margiela fragrance, this is at the Barber's, I thought that this was a niche house because the quality is super high. And I'd never heard of Maison Margiela as a fashion house or anything like that. But apparently it is. It is a designer line. Even though At the Barber's is good and it's high quality, I don't think it's high quality enough on its own to be considered niche because it's not creative at all. This is like a lighter, brighter version of Jacquard Noir. Now, this, on the other hand, the quality is up there. It's very good. But the creativity pushes this to niche level. I've never smelled another fragrance that can make something smell like it's burning or burnt. Like, there are smoky fragrances out there, but this smells like something is burning. This smells like burnt wood. And that level of creativity, like I've never smelled anything like it in my life. I know that's what they're trying to do with the replica line, is to make things that smell like other things. But some things are easier than others to replicate. This is a hard one. I don't know how they do it exactly. There's a lot of vanilla in this. And then there's chestnuts, it's meant to smell like chestnuts roasting on an open fire. But it's a combination of like cloves, Peru balsam, and juniper. I think those are the notes that somehow give it a kind of toxic, burning wood kind of feel. But yeah, they just pull it off, and it's really super creative. And the great thing is it's creative and it works. Like you can make something creative that nobody wants to wear. This is really nice. Now, I mean, you could make the case for Jazz Club, but Jazz Club, I know how they make the cigar smoke. The cigar smoke is the neatest part of Jazz Club, because it smells really earthy. All they do is just stick Styrax in there. Like, that's pretty basic. This, I have no idea what they did here. It's really cool. The next one might be a bit of a surprise to some people. It's this. It's Toy Boy from Moschino. Now this one, the quality is not as high as some of the others on this list, but it's very solid. I mean, this is not a bad fragrance. What I love about this is the level of creativity that Moschino put into this fragrance, because look, this is a spicy rose. And because I like oud, I've got a ton of rose fragrances in the designer line. I think I have about 12 or 15. So when I smelled this, it was just like, this rose doesn't smell anything like a typical designer rose. All designer roses smell the same. They're powdery, a little bit like iris, but a little sweeter and a little bit more feminine. That's what you're going to get with a designer rose. There's no powderiness to this rose at all. It's almost like, when the advertising campaign for this came out, had a lot of guys in bondage gear, and they looked at the dark side of humanity. Even the bears in bondage gear. And I think what they did was they looked at the dark side of the rose. They looked at a different part of the rose that would normally be used for men's fragrances. And don't get me wrong, it is a rose. It's definitely a rose. But the facets in it are very different than the facets that they use in typical designer perfumery. And the neat thing about this, though, is that it's one thing to make something super crazy and weird. It's another thing to have people like it. And they did it. They did it with this one. And I think they knew they did it. I think that's why they put an awful lot of advertising into their campaign. This is a phenomenal designer creation that is bordering on, if not entirely niche. Okay, now the last two, little bit of a cop-out of the same line. This is Dior Homme Intense. I think the use of iris in male perfumery was probably the biggest risk and the biggest area of creativity, maybe in all of designer fragrance. I think Le Male with the heavy vanilla in the mid-90s was a big deal too, but I don't think that was as big a risk as putting iris, which wasn't even used that much in female fragrances, and it's floral. In 2005, they came out, Christian Dior came out with an iris-based fragrance for men, which is like, what are the chances that this was going to take off? And yet it has. This particular line with the use of iris, I mean, Givenchy's main line is iris-based, or it was. Prada's main line was iris-based. I mean, massive influence throughout the industry. This is the sort of pinnacle, at least in terms of like people that are really into men's fragrances, of that particular iris. I think the use of ambrette is a better foil for iris than what it was in the original Dior Homme, which was cocoa or chocolate. Ambrette is creamier, and it makes the iris seem a little bit more powdery. I love the way they play off one another. So yeah, this was incredibly creative. Obviously it's from Dior, so the quality is also super high. And yeah, I think it really deserves credit. Now you might be saying, well, what about Bleu de Chanel? Bleu de Chanel, and I've gotten this wrong in the past, Bleu de Chanel was all about marketing. There have basically been aquatic fragrances, and that's essentially what Bleu de Chanel is. It's emphasizing the fact that it's aquatic. There have been aquatic fragrances since the late 80s. I mean, Cool Water, it's an aquatic fragrance. It used cologne. right, to get that aquatic feel. Then in 96, you had Acqua di Gio. And all Bleu de Chanel did was, hey, let's stick it in a blue bottle and let's use a name that we had from the 1940s. So we had for a female fragrance. Yeah, that's not even the name was original. But they marketed it really well and they made it seem like it was something new, but it wasn't. It wasn't. Whereas this, Iris, that was really new. Number 5 is in the same line, and that is Dior Parfum. And this one's on here, just pure quality. This is the best quality designer fragrance I've ever tried. The performance is ridiculous. The sillage is ridiculous. The complexity is ridiculous. Now, I think this is a lot more wearable, but in cold weather, this is unbeatable. And yeah, this is I think this is just, in terms of overall quality, yeah, this is actually niche in a designer bottle. Yeah, it's just hard, man. I'll try not to use that expression as much as I have in the past because, yeah, it just doesn't really happen all that much. Anyway, thanks for watching, dudes. Take it easy.